I've done all mine.
Harold, good to have you today.
Nice to be here, my sparring partner. You're not going to go soft on me here with the.
No, you better say something spicy so me and you can go at it. You know, even if you got to make it up, let's just do it.
Okay.
You know?
That's why we call this Friday morning fights.
Right.
With Geraldo. Geraldo, were you watching the president last night?
I was indeed. I was.
Well, here's a soundbite that should get things started. Whether you love me or hate me, you got to vote for me, he says.
Let me tell you, if for some reason I wouldn't have won the election, these markets would have crashed. The bottom line is, I know you like me, and this room is a love fest, I know that, but you have no choice but to vote for me because your 401ks, down the tubes, everything's going to be down the tubes. So whether you love me or hate me, you got to vote for me. You have the best unemployment. You have the most successful state in the history of your state and in the history of our country. And then you're going to vote for somebody else? Oh, great. Let's vote for Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren.
All right, Geraldo, what do you
I
think?
hate to laugh, but it's pretty funny.
What do you think?
Well, you know, Steve has obviously tied his destiny to the economy. He's made it the biggest part of
That's
his.
a winning argument for him,
It's a winning argument, unless it's not a winning argument. And what I have noticed, and you know, I try not to be ultra partisan, but what I have noticed is the disconcerting number of anti or non-Fox commentators seeming to cheer on the possibility of an economic recession because an economic recession would rebound badly for President Trump. So they're rooting for a recession so Trump gets dimmed in his prospects. And I find that unpatriotic, to say the least. It reminds me of during the George W. Bush administration when people were rooting for the war to go badly so Kerry would beat George W. Bush in 2004. I think that at some point you got to suspend your partisanship. Everybody should be rooting for the economy. Everybody should be rooting for peace. You know, the president's statement that everybody must vote for him, that's kind of hyperbole, but I thought that he was in fine spirits last night.
One of the #1 issues for Americans right now, according to the polls, is immigration, and he touched on that. He was slamming the Democrats for their policies. Listen to this.
Democrats want to open borders, and Republicans want strong borders. That's your difference. One wants open borders. We have serious criminals that want to come in, and if we had open borders, they would be flowing in like you've never seen before. Democrats want open borders. They don't mind crime. We do mind crime, and that's the way it is. We need to elect a strong Republican majority to end sanctuary cities, stop human traffickers, stop drug smugglers, and adopt an immigration system that puts the needs of American workers and families first.
Geraldo, I got a feeling you and Dan don't agree.
It's the first time we've ever talked about immigration on Fox. Me and Geraldo. No, I guess my take on this is President Trump has obviously seen a soft spot with the American people. They're tired of the lawlessness. It's not an anti-immigration issue. It's an anti-illegal immigration issue, and I think he should double down on this. I think people are tired of this.
I think it's gone beyond an illegal immigration issue, my brother. I think that what you have now is a feeling of almost xenophobic feeling that all immigrants are bad unless they come with hefty checkbooks.
You said that.
I heard the Ken Cuccinelli, saying that now send us you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses with a 401k.
That's not legislation.
But I mean, you can't have such harshness. Why are we being so harsh?
What's harsh
in a nation of immigrants? Why are we being so harsh?
See, my wife's a very smart person, but you know, we'll all agree.
Isn't your wife an immigrant?
She's
also?
an immigrant, but she just followed the rules. It's not complicated. It may be laborious. It may cost money, but we have rules, Geraldo. I don't like that. There's nothing xenophobic about asking people to come here the legal way at all. I think that's a made-up talking point.
But I think that the problem now is that legal, illegal is getting mushed together, and now there's a
not
feeling.
By Trump, by you.
No, when the president's minions go out and say we want these people to be able to take care of themselves, what he does is, my dad, Cruz Rivera, came from Puerto Rico, 1940. He's a citizen because Puerto Rico is a Puerto Rican American colony. He comes as a citizen. He's penniless. He knows nobody. By the time he was finished, he had a suburban home and college-educated children. That's the American dream.
Yeah, but
We
nobody's
need- we
suggesting
need to
your
give-
dad's the problem, though.
No,
We're
I'm
suggesting people
suggesting
that
my dad
violate-
is the solution. My
He
dad is the answer.
But that, see, you're conflating the two. Trump's point is that people who come here illegally in violation of the law are the issue, not people who come
Why
here
this
legally.
harshness, Dan? Why?
Although, what you're talking about with Ken Cuccinelli, he was talking about how the administration was going to start enforcing a law that has been on the books for a very
Since
long time.
1882.
I would like an immigration system.
Change the law if you don't like that.
I want to. Don't even have to change the law. I want a president who says America is a compassionate, giving country. I want folks who feel strongly pro-immigration to sponsor some of these families. You know, use some of your private assets. You got a spare room. You got a job in your little factory there or your little business. I want Americans now to be engaged
Geraldo.
in putting their bodies where their mouths are.
Geraldo, I have a spare room, and I have compassion for everyone. Everyone is God's child. But I have a little girl at home. You're asking me to put someone I don't know, a stranger, in the room next to my daughter?
Obviously, that would be, if it were a nice lady who is very smart and you like and goes to your church, I can conceive, Ainsley, of you, the biggest-hearted person I know, I can conceive of you being more engaged in this as you are in other compassionate issues. I just think that if you make immigration us and them, as the president's tone in New Hampshire yesterday seemed to indicate, the good Americans and the bad others going to come from other places and they come overwhelm us, and we use military analogies and invasion and so forth. When you do that, you really dim, I think, the mystique of America that makes us great.
Geraldo,
And I don't like it.
He did say if you are seeking asylum and you're in danger, then yes, we will let you in, even if you don't have, even if we have to put you on welfare. We'll take care of you.
I hate scapegoating, and I think that what you have now is immigrants being scapegoated.
No,
And
I entirely disagree, Geraldo. We have taken in millions of people. We are the most compassionate country on earth. I mean, facts and data have to matter. You can't just say compassion and act like that's a legislative solution to our problem. That doesn't mean anything outside of the facts and
president's
data.
legacy will be forever marred by the fact that children were taken from their parents.
That is
and
not the president's legacy.
That draconian policy caused him such heartache that was so unnecessary.
That was not the president's policy. That's the Flores consent decree. You know that. And you know what happened under Obama,
I would love
too.
to be in charge of these two things: immigration and tweeting. If I could be in charge of those two things for the president,
The czar of tweeting? The social media czar.
I want to be the tweeting czar. I volunteer.
I have seen some of your tweets. I don't know that you should be in charge of it. Let's talk about something else. It was announced yesterday the country of Israel was denying Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, the congresswomen, access to Israel. This after the president said it would show weakness if Israel allowed them in. Well, now, apparently, Congresswoman Tlaib has been granted, because she made an appeal directly to the Interior Minister on humanitarian basis. She is going to be allowed into the country, and the letter she wrote said this.
I would like to request admittance to Israel in order to visit my relatives, and specifically my grandmother, who is in her 90s and lives in this certain part of the West Bank. This could be my last opportunity to see her. I will respect any restrictions and will not promote boycotts against Israel during my visit. Geraldo?
Well, I'm enormously impressed that the Congresswoman sought to reassure Israel and the Israeli government that she wasn't going to be agitating. I think that was a big give on her part. I was appalled, and maybe that's too strong a word, and it sounds so political. I was hurt when Netanyahu, at President Trump's urging, said that the two congresswomen were barred. They have different points of view than we do. One is a Somali refugee, the other a Palestinian American, the first ever. Of course, they have different bundles of personal experiences. Of course, they're going to see issues differently than we do. I was really hurt that Israel, at the president's urging, said they couldn't come. I think that Congresswoman Tlaib has taken a giant step toward assuring people that she's not this crazy radical going to run off and cause a revolution in Israel. It's a humanitarian gesture from Israel's part. She's going to see her granny in the West Bank. But I'm telling you, what is it, 52 years now? Occupation of those territories. I'm sorry that you know
not occupied.
they're not occupied. I've been there many,
That's
many
not
times.
occupied territory.
Yeah, when I see Israeli soldiers and Palestinian civilians, that's an occupation.
Listen, Arabs have more freedom in Israel than they do in other Arab countries. They're not
Maybe true.
occupied.
Maybe true.
That's inaccurate.
They are occupied.
Well, let's see if they allow Ilhan Omar in. We don't know about
Well,
that
it
yet.
would be nice. Why not? Why not?
Stay tuned for that. Geraldo, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It wasn't so bad.
No, we got it again on Hannity next week.
Let's see what happens during the commercial. All right, Geraldo, thank you very much. Have a
Thank
nice
you,
weekend.
Steve. Thank you, Ainsley.
All right, meanwhile, switching gears, NASCAR legend Dale Earnhardt Jr. and his family out of the hospital after their plane skidded off the runway and, as you can see, started on fire.
That's right. Steve Harrigan is live in Elizabethton, Tennessee, with how they made it out alive. Steve, it is incredible that they all walked out of that plane. How'd they do it?
Ainsley, it's amazing to have a good news plane crash story, but that's exactly what we have now. You can see that plane right behind me, a Cessna Citation, a 7-seater. You can see some federal investigators around it now trying to figure out exactly what went wrong. That plane is pretty much incinerated, all except for the very front near the nose and the door. Because the door was able to be opened and not burned to a crisp like the rest of the plane, all 5 people were able to get out safely. That's Dale Earnhardt Jr., his wife, his 15-month-old daughter, 2 pilots, even the dog made it out. Federal officials here and local law enforcement say they were incredibly fortunate.
I guess the only word I can say is that they were extremely lucky. When it came through the fence wrapped around the airplane, and there's a section there that the fence is wrapped around the plane. If that would have been where the door was, it would have been a lot more difficult for them to get the door open.
You can actually see when you look at the wreckage, part of that fence is actually enmeshed inside that plane. Earnhardt, not only a very successful driver, often voted the most popular driver as well. He was coming into town to be a color commentator on the races at Bristol this weekend. He works for NBC. They told him to take the weekend off and rest up with his family. We're seeing federal investigators around the plane now. It was good weather at 3:40 in the afternoon yesterday. Still no word on why that plane skidded off the runway and burst into flames. Back to you guys.
All right, Steve Harrigan live in Tennessee with the very latest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. All right, we are learning some breaking news. Jillian has the latest for us.
That's right,
Jillian?
some news out of Lower Manhattan. So let's get right to this Fox News alert. As police swarm a New York City subway station just blocks away from the World Trade Center to investigate 2 suspicious packages. This is happening right now. Police telling Fox News they look like pressure cookers. One was found on a platform at the Fulton Street station and another outside on the street. The station has been evacuated and trains are not stopping there right now. We have a crew on the way to the scene and we will bring you more news as soon as we get it. Again, this is happening right now in Lower Manhattan. And this was Philadelphia earlier this week. Dramatic new video of that hours-long standoff there. Watch as police officers hide behind cars and dodge bullets. Six officers were hurt. The U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania now blasting Philadelphia's district attorney, blaming him in part for the attack by promoting a, quote, culture of disrespect.
We've endured over a year and a half of the worst kind of slander against law enforcement, with the DA routinely calling police and prosecutors corrupt and racist.
Suspect Maurice Hill started shooting and barricaded himself inside his home as police tried serving a narcotics warrant. He has a long criminal history and he should not have been able to own a gun. Let's look at your headlines. We'll certainly keep you updated on both of them.
In fact, we're going to talk a little more about your lead story. A pair of, now according to Brian Yennis, our correspondent, his police sources say they definitely are a pair of pressure cookers. They have shut down the Fulton Street station in Lower Manhattan. Apparently one was found inside, we've heard initial reports, the other outside. And Dan, it's great to have Dan Bongino, who has, as a law enforcement, has investigated this for a while. Dan, we don't know whether or not they're live.
Sure.
We don't know if they've got explosives
being
in them,
X-rayed
but
now.
clearly they are meant to scare people.
Yeah, and New York City, thankfully, the NYPD, where I worked for 4 years, has the finest bomb squad, in my opinion, in the world, if not one of the finest. Right now is probably when you're going to bring in the robots. You're going to take a look through X-ray what's inside. They can tell relatively quickly if there's any kind of circuitry that appears abnormal, obviously, for a pressure cooker. And then after that, if it, God forbid, is deemed to be a device, they'll put it in that truck. and they're going to have to go take it out to where they take it, the facility, and they're going to have to detonate and remote and obviously find out what happened. But we don't know that yet. Obviously, we'll see what's inside.
Well, how diabolical. It's rush hour.
Yeah, rush hour, and the fact that, you know, this just happened as we were on the air, and me going back into my former law enforcement mode. When you said it wasn't one, but it was two, it automatically cues my suspicion. One could obviously be an accident or a hoax, but two is either a deliberate hoax. You don't just leave a pressure cooker, in other words, in the middle of a Manhattan street. Could be a hoax device, but, you know.
Dan, if you look at these live images, this is our chopper up in the air. Yeah. What do we see here?
Yeah, they're obviously trying to clear the area first. There's going to be a blast zone for these things. Again, you treat every device like you treat every firearm as if it's live and loaded every time. You don't have the luxury.
This is live right here.
Yeah, you don't have the luxury to assume it's not. So they're going to have to clear the area. They're going to have to get a safe zone. And based on a pressure cooker of that specific size, it's probably going to be a couple blocks.
Right, and they're reportedly pressure cookers, but we, once again, to reiterate, we don't know if there are explosives inside. Of course, this harkens back to the Boston bombing, and of course the pressure cookers that were found in Midtown Manhattan. I want to say around 23rd Street a couple of years ago. Now, as you know, New York City has got more cameras on corners and at locations like this than most cities in the United States for just such a purpose. So if one person did drop off both of them, we're going to see that on video in no time, aren't we?
Yeah, one of my best friends, actually, when it was in my wedding when I grew up, he's a great guy. He works in TERU, the Technical Assistance Research Unit. And the NYPD has a network of cameras themselves they operate, but when you put that in conjunction with private cameras, which are now everywhere, and not only that, Steve, the camera works have gotten better. The resolution is finer now.
High def.
Yeah, and the chances of in Lower Manhattan, I mean, we're not talking about an area of the Midwest that's not densely populated. The chances in Lower Manhattan of walking on any street corner, as he told me once, and not being recorded by multiple cameras are nil, not zilch. So someone's on camera somewhere.
Well, there's so much fear, in all of us with school shootings and church shootings and what's happening at these ICE facilities, and also 9/11, of course, and this happening downtown. What advice do you have for folks that live in New York? Will they be able to even take the subway? Do they shut down the whole line?
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll see. This obviously being pressure cookers, you always think, could this just be an accident? But again, when you said two, it says to me either it's a hoax device or, yeah.
Here's from our bureau chief here in New York. There are two large pressure cookers, one near the elevator and another about 35 feet away.
Yeah, I mean, that just doesn't sound like an accident. Again, it doesn't mean they're explosive devices. We don't know that yet. That's not what the reporting says.
But it's not as if somebody went pressure cooker shopping and left them at the subway
And I mean,
station.
when I was a Secret Service agent, it wasn't uncommon to have an unintended backpack. People drop them, they forget them, they go to the bathroom, they leave things in the bathroom. But, you don't exactly walk around in Manhattan with a pressure cooker getting off the subway and then leave another one accidentally. Again, doesn't mean it's an explosive, but it does sound kind of odd. I think we can all agree.
I know we're sending reporters down there. Laura Ingalls on her. She's on her way. Get some more information.
And because it is rush hour, and we apologize for some of these cameras moving around, but it's breaking news, and we're trying to get in position. In a tweet, the police department said expected police presence and emergency vehicles in the area. Check New York City Transit subway for possible schedule changes. More info to follow. Delays and changes to service were reported on the 2, 3, 4, 5, A, C, J, and Z lines due to the investigation, according to the MTA. So that part of Manhattan is pretty much not moving.
It's not exactly a low traffic area either at this time on a Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we've got the finest counterterrorism department here with our police department. In a circumstance like this, Dan, explain what they immediately do.
Well, obviously, clearing any kind of a blast zone is first. You have to make the area safe. But secondly, they have various robotic devices they can employ, so you don't have to put any human personnel in direct contact right away. But if that robotic device does detect, God forbid, some kind of circuitry or some kind of explosive in there, they'll engage in render safe procedures, which is going to require them to put it on that truck. We've seen, unfortunately, all too often on the news, that blast truck clear the highways. You're obviously not going to drive it on the highway with cars and then get it to an area where they can render it safe.
If you're just tuning in, there are 2 pressure cookers that were found in the lower part of Manhattan, in like the Chelsea area. It was the Fulton Street station. One was found on the platform down underneath the ground where everyone gets onto the subway. It's very busy down there. Lots of people going up and down those stairs, so I'm sure it was just chaos when police announced that they had found a pressure cooker, and then there was one up on the street, too.
And can I add as well, knowing the NYPD as I do, having worked there and still having friends there, they're probably now on heightened alert elsewhere as well. Again, even if this is some kind of really poorly thought out, awful hoax, it's disturbing, and it shows someone with malintent. So they're probably on high alert elsewhere, looking around as well.
Well, it's interesting that you would say that we've got little robots that can move right up to it and X-ray what's inside. That keeps people safe. But let's go back to the Boston bombing, where there were also a couple of pressure cookers dropped off by the Sarnia brothers. Those were destructive because what was inside?
Yeah, the shrapnel. They can use marbles, shards of glass. They can use bolts and screws, and it's not just the blast and the over-under pressure that does physical damage. It's the explosion and the propelling of shrapnel through a crowd of densely packed people. That obviously it's the equivalent of bullet rounds going off everywhere in all kinds of different directions. Yeah, you know, when these people design these devices, again, we don't know that yet with this. I totally understand. We haven't seen the reporting, but if it were a device like that, when they design them, they typically design them to inflict maximum carnage.
I remember a couple of years ago when they found the pressure cookers in Midtown Manhattan. There was an investigation. They were able to figure out who dropped them off via all the video cameras.
Yeah.
And I want to say, and you know, this is my memory, so it could be faulty a little bit, but I want to say that the person who dropped them off was from New Jersey and had come in on the subway and was caught trying to, I think, place other devices a couple of days later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's impossible not to get caught in New York City. I mean, New York City is really the surveillance capital of the world. Like I said, the private camera network and the public camera network.
What do you mean, the private camera?
Private cameras. In other words, the NYPD has their own camera network for hotspots, crime locations, but private businesses, whether it be Fox or anyone else on the street, have their own network of cameras that the NYPD will send their people in and say, hey, can we get access to the footage? And typically the businesses in New York, under very rare circumstances, will say no. They'll say, sure, no problem. You know, they're always eager to help out. It's their business. It's their city, too. So really, it's you know, the city's under surveillance all the time, whether you know it or not.
We're just learning that the counterterrorism unit here in New York is reporting now that the package is safe. It was not a bomb. It was not an explosive. Yeah. Let's bring in Joe Borelli. He's a Republican New York City councilman. Joe, good to have you here.
Good morning, guys. Thank you.
Good morning. We were going to have you on the couch talking about something else, but then this news breaks. What's your reaction?
Well, look, thankfully, the NYPD's Counterterrorism Bureau confirmed to us now that it's certainly not an explosive. But, Dan, you pointed out earlier, when you hear the first instances that it's 2 devices, that should automatically raise a red flag. What people didn't also realize is that this Fulton Street station actually connects underground to the World Trade Center stations. So that automatically raises certain red flags, and I think the police department had a very quick, very accurate, and very thorough response, and thankfully things went well.
Finest police department in the world.
100%.
And they were able to figure it out. So just about 15 minutes ago, the news broke that they had spotted 2 pressure cookers down there at that station within 35 feet of each other. And then, as you can see, bomb squad was dispatched. People were kept away. And now, apparently, the police say, without a doubt, the devices are not explosive. So that is good news.
That's great news.
But obviously, this was intended to scare the living daylights out of people.
And thank God we have such a professional police department that, I mean, literally in minutes. We just found this out, what, 5 minutes ago? I mean, think about the efficiency of their procedures that in 5 minutes we're finally getting this out. So.
Yeah, and I would speculate this also probably came from a civilian calling this in. You know, someone actually taking the time to call it in, saying we see something, we saw something, we reported it. You really have to commend the work police officers around the country do, especially here in New York. Imagine going into this extremely high-pressure situation where there might be extremely dangerous and potential problems, and they do a great job.
All right. Once again, those pressure cookers found at the Fulton Street station, not explosive. Nonetheless, the traffic is all tied up in Lower Manhattan. All right, Joe Borelli, thank you very much for joining us live. All right, we're going to step aside. Back in 2 minutes. Well, this is a Fox News alert. Within the last 5 minutes, we got the all-clear signal from the New York City Police Department. It was about an hour ago that 2 large pressure cookers